Begin the current Daf, Masechת Nazir Daf Yud Beis. We begin on the bottom of Yud Alpha Beis, where the Gemara is going to introduce a unrelated halachic teaching related to Kedushin. But the reason why we're introducing it is because it's going to be asked on from the halacha of our Mishnah, which we spoke about. If someone says Hareini Nazir, V'alai Legalech Nazir, V'shama Chaber V'ama V'ani, which is a whole different content and context, but the framework of what we're expecting and what your intention is on is going to come up related to that Amoraic teaching regarding the halacha of Kedushin. Today's Daf. Something discussed in today's Daf is the teaching of Rabbi Yochanan that we're going to start off with. If someone says to his agent, go marry me off to a woman, and the guy goes, but the shliach dies. Now we don't know who he's engaged to. So he's going to be usher in all women in the world. However, he's going to be permitted in a woman that had no relatives, even if she had a sister, but the sister was married at that time, even if she subsequently got divorced, that's a type of woman that he will be permitted to. So he's going to be permitted in everyone else, but that woman permitted. And the Gemara is going to ask a question from our Mishnah of Hareini Nazir, Legalech Nazir, on that actual halacha. Then the Daf continues regarding the next Mishnah. If someone is Megaleach on a Chatzi Nazir, what's the halacha? Is he going to be chayiv for half, or is he going to be melech nazir shalom? He's going to be chayiv for all. But we're going to see in the Gemara, there's no machlekes if you say, let's say, chatzi karbanas nazir life. If you say half of the karbanas of a nazir on me, so good, bring half the karbanas. What's wrong? That's a valid phrase. If you say karbanas chatzi nazir life, the karbanas of a half a nazir on me, well, there's no half a nazir. Then you got to bring all the karbanas. So we're going to see exactly what is the case that they disagree about when you take upon yourself half the naziris, if it's the whole naziris is only half. Some important terms of the concept in today's daf, some famous Talmudic dictums of chazaka, shlich eisa shlichusa. There's a presumption that when you give an agent a job to do, he's going to do his agency. And therefore, again, if he died, you assume that he did it, and you're stuck a little because he probably got you engaged to someone you don't know who. Called the Parish Meruba Parish is the classic halacha that if, let's say, there's 10 stores in town, 9 are kosher, but one is not kosher, and you find a piece of meat, the piece of meat that you find is coming from the majority, and you could assume that it's going to be kosher. In contrast, what's called kol kavu kemechsa mechzedami. If, let's say, there's all these 10 stores, and one of the stores you go and you buy from, and you don't know which one you went to, then even if, let's say, you're going to have the majority kosher, we're not going to assume the majority that is what you got it from, because it's stationary. Anything that's stationary, we automatically view it as 50-50, and therefore you would have to say, let's say, by a deraisa, that it's going to be stringent. Also have the machlekes, Remeir and Abisi, that were mentioned many times. Remeir says Tafos Lashon Rishon. We go based on the beginning of your statement, and that's primary. Abisi says no. It's not only the beginning of your statement that's important, but even the end of your statement is also critical for translating what you're trying to say. So begin the card Daf Yud Alpha Beis, 2 lines up at the bottom of the Yomid. Says the Gemara, an unrelated teaching to what we've been discussing, but again, this is going to come right back. Teaching Rabbi Yochanan. Someone says to his agent, he tells his friend, as he continues to be Beis Medav, look, I'm too busy learning, I'm too busy buying real estate, whatever it is, go ahead, do me a favor, I don't care which woman it is, you decide, get me engaged. Okay. Says the Gemara, that the Bach adds on the words, Umeisa Shliach, the agent dies, and now he's asa b'chal nashim shabaylam. He's forbidden in all the women in the world. Why is he forbidden in all the women in the world? Because chazaka, there's a presumption that shliach eisa shlichusai, that an agent does his agency. Now, b'kivan loy pagashlei, since he didn't tell him which one it is, so holo yoda hayni ukadishlei, doesn't know who he's engaged to. So therefore, everyone might be the relative of the woman that he's engaged to. So he's forbidden. Now, Taisa asks, he says, wait a second. Why are you saying he's forbidden all the women of the world? Everybody in the world should be forbidden to marry women. Because maybe that's the woman that's engaged to that man through that shliach. And he says, even according to Rabbeinu Tam, that says that women are believed to say, Lo nis kadashti, what, I'm not that woman, I was never engaged. But that's an adult. A minor that doesn't know if her father accepted Kedushin for her, what are you going to say if the father already died? Everyone should be forbidden to marry those women. So Tais says a very important principle. He says that the truth is, biblically, even this guy himself is permitted to marry. Because you go after the majority. You're not going to say that this is a relative of that girl in Colombia that was a relative of the girl that shliach had made him engaged to. What's the odds? Right? So Rav would tell us that even he's permitted in every woman. But it says, Taisus is a kanasa bialma. It's a penalty that he made an agent unspecific and they didn't tell him who he should get engaged to. So for him, we penalize him, but for others, we don't penalize. But then says Taisus, what are you going to mean? What do you mean? If you're going to say, it should be Issa Deiraisa because of Arayas. And this is Kavua. The people are stationary. And you say, Kol Kavua Kamechza Mechzadami. So everyone should be forbidden. Even if there's majorities, we don't go based on majorities. When you're stationary, you say it's 50-50. Says Taisus, no. We don't say Kavua Kamechza, it's a big Yisai Taisus saying, you don't say Kavua Kamechza Mechzadami only when the Isser is recognizable by itself. It is inherently what it is. And the heter is recognizable for itself. You just don't know which one. But when the isser is not recognizable for itself, you don't say kavui. It doesn't explain what exactly he's saying. But what it seems to be simply is that no one knows who this unknown woman is. There's no Carmen Sandiego. You don't know who to pick. It's not like she's there. You just can't find her. No one knows. There's no heker la'atzmoi. So therefore, it says it's not going to be considered as kavu kamersa mechzadami. Therefore, we will say called the parish meruba parish, and really it should be permitted even for him. Don't ask me the whole world should be forbidden. It might be that one. No, even he'll be permitted. We're not assuming that the relative is going to be the one woman he's going to try to marry. But al taknas, therefore we say he's forbidden to marry any woman in the world. That is the halacha of Rabbi Yechanan. Says the Gemara, Eisvei l'shlakish Rabbi Yechanan. Shlaki asked to Rabbi Yechanan from the Mishnah Masechtes Kinim, one of the more difficult Masechtes in Shas. Mishnayis. Mishnah says as follows: Ken, which is a pier or a nest, setuma, which is unspecific. Meaning the halacha is that a zav, which is a male who has a certain discharge from his male organ, or a zava, which is the equivalent by a female, or Yeled, woman gave birth, halacha is that when they go through their purification process, they have to bring a chatas ha'if, a bird chatas, and a oila ha'if, bird oila. Now, when you buy a stuma unspecific, it means to say that when the guy who has to bring the carbon bought these two birds, he didn't specify which one will be a chatas and which one will be an oila. Now, why are we picking specifically the case of stuma, which some Gemaras bring from the Taisus Yamtiv, that obviously Taisus did not have a girs in the Gemara, that had it been a specific, it would be no takana. Taisus makes it sound like there is a remedy. Why picking when it's unspecific? Because if it was explicit, that when you had there's two birds, and you knew which one was chatas, which one's oila, then you would have to be very lengthy to explain which bird flew away. Was it the oila? Was it the chatas? And that's the whole Masechtas Kinam. Kinam is very complex. That this one flew over there, and this one flew to the next one, and flew to the next one, and they came back, and they came back. You don't know which one came back, and this, and it's like a whole Megillah. So therefore, we would just set a bridge to say one of them flew away. So we have two birds. You didn't say which one's the oila, which one's the chatas. You bought a pair of birds because you're a zav, and you have to go bring a carbon. Now what happened is, one of the two birds flew off into the airspace. Or a different similar case, it flew amongst the chatois, the bird chatois that have to be killed. For example, if let's say the owner who has to bring this carbon died, or he got a tumor with something else, that those chatoyas have to die. And this bird got mixed in, it flew into that nest where those birds are. Or one of them died. Basically, what happens is one of the two birds are not here anymore. Unusable, lost, died, whatever it is. So, okay, yikach zug l'sheni. You have one bird left in the nest, you buy another bird as a pair for the second one. Okay, that is the Mishnah. Now, but this is the Gemara is going to ask on Rabbi Yechanan. Ve'ilu now, had it been a kain mufareshes, had it been an explicit nest, but you don't know which one it is that flew away. Let's say one was a chatas, one was a oila, and one would have flown away. So then, ein lo takana, then you wouldn't have any remedy. You wouldn't be able to get another one to be a pair for it, because you don't know which one's the remaining one for the other one to be its pair, because the halacha is that the oil has to be on the top of the mizbeach and the chatas on the bottom, meaning the birds. So you can't do it in the wrong place in the mizbeach. So you can't just get another one for you because you don't know which one flew away. Now, okay, that's if it's explicit. V'ilu, whereas sharkin and bialma, but in general, other pairs of birds, misaknan, you could fix. Meaning, what does that mean? Like the Rush explains, we're not going to invalidate all pairs of birds in the world to say, hey, wait a second, maybe this is the one that flew away. When you get birds are all over the world, right? That's how we get birds. They're around flying somewhere, we catch them and we use them. But maybe this is the bird from that guy's pair of birds that you found, and you're getting an atonement with your carbon chaveroi. So obviously we see we're not concerned for that, because that's not what the Mishnah is saying. Wait a second, asked Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. V'mai? Why? Leima kol chada v'chada. You should say in every bird in the world, Dilmahai niyu. Maybe this is that bird. Maybe it's the one that flew away. In other words, it already was established to be a carbon for Reuben. How could Shimon go ahead and fulfill his obligation? Now, that's a question on Rabbi Yochanan, who says, wait a second, every single woman might be that relative, so you're us and every single woman in the world, so then why didn't you say the same thing? Why this bird that flew away? Now, Taisus right away jumps in and he asks, that would be good without what I said before, says Taisus. But I already explained that we don't penalize everyone in the world. It's not halacha. We generally go based on right, the majority. We're not going to assume that this bird that I got is one of his bird of that guy's bird that flew away. I can go up to the majority. So it was only a penalty for the guy who got engaged through a shliach, but stam. So what does that have to do with the halacha? What's the Gemara's question? So it says what you could say is that Rish Lakish understands that other pairs of birds in the world, that even for Reuven is being remedied. In other words, if let's say this Reuven, who one of his birds flew away, if he's going to have to bring another pair of birds, let's say for another discharge, there's a guy who's becoming a zav a lot of times, he has this problem. So it sounds like even for him, he'll be able to bring a carbon at one point with another bird. But why? But I thought you said for the guy himself, you do penalize. So also you should penalize him. Why? There you penalize him because what are you doing telling him to be Mekadosh Isha Stam? You should have told him someone specific. It's your fault, your negligence, now he died, so you're stuck. Here also says, Taisus, that because this guy didn't watch his pair of birds to make sure it doesn't fly away, to say that this one that flew away maybe is from the first pair that he had, and therefore is already established for that carbon, he can't use it for this carbon, because it may be chatzas, maybe oil, whatever, this and that. So that's Rish Lakish Kashan Rabbi Yochanan. From the halacha of penalty, that when the guy himself is negligent, you told me Rabbi Yochanan that we're going to penalize him, and then all the women in the world are forbidden to him. Why don't you say all the birds in the world are forbidden to him too? How could this Reuven himself, when he brings another kina, another pair of birds, he's allowed to? So Amalei is where it gets a little bit more fascinating, more colorful. He says, what do you mean? He says, Kamina, ano. Rabbi Yochanan says, what's the case I'm talking about? I'm talking about an Isha, a woman, Deloi Naida, who doesn't wander. Now, although a woman is not totally stationary, because obviously she's not locked up, but it is very similar to something that's stationary. So therefore it would make sense to be stringent. As we say in halacha, kavua is always more stringent because you say kemerza merza. So even if you have a majority to say permitted, but when you have something stationary, it's going to be, even if you have whatever the odds are, doesn't make a difference, we view it as 50-50. So smeka deraisa lochuma, we have to go stringently regarding that rise. And you're telling me regarding a case of a prohibition that wanders? Meaning the birds, as the Rush explains, have no stationary context in their life, because he explains even when they go back to their nest, they're always moving from place to place, and they jump from nest to nest, and they have no kviyas malkum. Oh, so therefore I agree. Of course, the Mishnah Kinim doesn't say that the birds in the world are going to be forbidden even for the guy himself, because they polish, they're nayid, they're moving around. So then you go based on the laws of majority. I'm talking about a woman that's basically stationary. Stationary is more chamer, and therefore, yes, we're going to knas him and we're going to make it that it's us from all the women in the world. And then he says, the Gemara follows up on this idea and says, if you're going to say, wait a second, what do you mean? Women also move around, meaning, say beshuka ashkach v'kadosh, maybe say that the shliach found the woman that he betrothed him to in the street. In other words, when you find her in the street, then we should say that he could have made the kedushin then, which at that point she's not stationary, and therefore it's not kavua. So therefore maybe, why is Rabbi Yochanan then saying, meaning says Rabbi Yochanan myself, why am I saying that it's going to be aser? Why wouldn't you say over there called the parish? That's meruba parish. He says no, because hasam hadra l'nichusa. There ultimately, the woman, even if for momentarily she went out to the street to buy something, but she goes back to her stationary life at home. And therefore it's similar to kavua. But a pair of birds, mihadra, does it go back? In other words, birds are something that are generally stationary, and therefore it's not going to have halacha of kavua, and therefore it's going to be batal in most pairs of birds in the world. But you're right, had it been kavua, we consider as half of the kingdom in the world are aser, like we do by Isha Mekadeshes, as if you Mekadesh half the women in the world. So therefore, says Rabbi Yochanan, there's a difference between birds and women. That's one for the birds, that the birds, they're always flying around. So then you'll go by majority. But the women, it's going to be kol kavu, kamech tzamech tzadami, and therefore it's going to be aser by the women. That's the teaching of Rabbi Yochanan. However, Amar Rava. Rava says, Umoid Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan would agree, meaning although Rabbi Yochanan says this guy is basically stuck, he can never marry a woman ever again because every woman might be the relative of the woman that he was engaged to. But he says, I have a way out for this guy. Rabbi Yochanan would agree Isha by a woman that would be permitted to him if she'ein la loy bas. From the Rush, it sounds like that literally that he doesn't have any daughters. Loy bas bas. I mean, this woman herself, this person that is available on the market for this guy, who is forbidden every woman in the world, this woman he's allowed to marry. Her profile on shidduch.com is she'ein loy bas, she doesn't have a daughter. Loy bas bas doesn't have a daughter's daughter. Loy bas ben doesn't have a son that has a daughter. Loy im doesn't have a mother. Loy im not a mother's mother. Meaning, she's not going to be forbidden because there's no relative of hers that could have been the one that was engaged to him to make her forbidden as a relative of the woman that was engaged to. And v'loy ochais, and doesn't have a sister. So, this woman can't be forbidden to him. She can't be the relative of the woman that he was engaged to, even if she was to engage to a woman. Now, but there's even a bigger chiddush, there's even a twist. That is, v'afa pisha hoysela ochis, and even if she had a sister, but v'nizgarsha la'achar mikan, but she got divorced subsequently, meaning, at the time of the shlichus, that woman was married, even if she subsequently got divorced, dahahi shalya. That's the woman that this guy is allowed to marry. So, in other words, for example, let's say this guy appointed a shliach on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It's a ben azmanim, Chodesh Nisan. He comes back, so he says, I'm appointing you to get me engaged. Now, all the relatives that were fit for this person, this woman, to be forbidden from the kedushin, at that Rosh Chodesh Nisan, they were all married. So from places it actually sounds like maybe she had a mother and had a daughter, whatever this and that, but they were all engaged. They're all married at that time when this guy made a shliach. So even if they got divorced before the day of the kedushin that the shliach had done, still this rachel is going to be permitted to this mishalech, as the Gemara is going to explain. As the Gemara continues and says, my timer, what's the reason? In other words, this is the tesis on the bottom that says, in other words, really when we're asking my time is, what's the case that she didn't have a sister and now she does have one? And truthfully, the Gemara really should have used the word heichidami. It's just because, and this is a famous quote in the Rishonim, which is the first time Tais is mentioning, and the Rush mentioned all the beginning of the Masechta, it's called Lashon Nazir Meshuna. Lashon Nazir Meshuna means to say not a Nazir's words are abnormal, but the words of Masechta Nazir it's a very different Masechta. As you can see when you're learning it, the words are Meshuna, it's different than, so although it's using the word my time, it really means to say Heichidami. But he says you could really explain the words my time, that truth is, the Gemara really knew that we're talking about where these women, how could you not have a sister and then have a sister? So no, the Torah says no, the Gemara knew that these women were married to men, but that now they got divorced, but still, it should still be problematic, misafik, to say that what's the reason why it's going to be permitted. As we'll see in the flow of the Gemara, that even if she was married at that time, but how can we say that this woman is going to be permitted? As the Gemara explains, he says, what's the case, Tomat? But he shaited the kamale. At that moment, when he told the shliach, their sister, let's say, could be any one of the relatives, but let's say the sister, having the Sivan the Gavri, they were married to men. Kimash v'shliach, and this is a very fundamental principle the Gemara is going to say right now. Kimash v'shliach, when he went ahead and made an agent, the milsa de kaima kamei, it's something that's available in front of him that he made him a shliach. The milsa de kaima kamei, something that's not available in front of him, loy mash v'shliach, he didn't make him into an agent. In other words, a person's intent is not to make a kedushin for a woman that's going to subsequently be divorced after that. So therefore, even if, let's say, this shliach was Mekadesh, one of the relatives of Rachel, Rachel will not be forbidden with that kedushin. Why not? Because he didn't make him a shliach for that, and therefore the relative of Rachel, the kedushin doesn't take effect. In other words, let's say Rosh Chodesh Nisan, just to explain the case the way Tay is saying. This guy says, I'm home from Bein Zmanim, get me engaged. I give you a week to get me engaged. 2 days later, this relative of Rachel, let's say her sister, gets divorced. She gets the get, finally waiting for a long time, gets a get. 2 days after that, she's available on the market. The shliach sees, wow, what a great girl, something happened there, whatever it is. The guy was off the wall. And he says, here's a ring. I'm getting you engaged to this guy, to this Reuven. Says, and again, this Reuben doesn't know. The shliach dies, he gets in some car accident or whatever, dies, now he doesn't know. He's forbidden every woman in the world. Now, this sister of Rachel, that, like, call her Leah, that this shliach had done the agency for, to get him engaged to, is not mikudeshes. And therefore, this Rachel is still, who has no other relatives, besides this sister, who was married on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, even if possibly the shliach had gone to her 2 days after she got divorced, which was 2 days after Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and he says, here, he gave her the ring and she took it, this Rachel is still going to be permitted to this Reuven. Why? Because when he made him a shliach, his intent was what's available. Rosh Chodesh Nisan, that woman was not available yet. She only got divorced 2 days later. So even if the shliach did a kedushin with her, not a valid kedushin. So this Rachel has no other relative but that sister. She's not going to be ushered to Reuven because no one else, that she couldn't have been a relative of a woman that he was engaged to. Now, at this point, the Gemara assumes, yeah, if that woman doesn't have any other relatives.
Maybe it was Rachel.
Oh, yeah, well, maybe, right, exactly. No, right. Yeah, exactly, right, because that might be Rachel, exactly. That Shilei would be forbidden because it might have been Rachel was available then. Now, at this point, the Gemara assumes that a person's intent is only on something that's in front of him. And that's why the Gemara is going to ask from the halacha of our Mishnah. What's the question from our Mishnah? It says the Gemara Tanan. We learned in our Mishnah, if someone says, Hareini Nazir, it's almost like a whirlwind. We're getting back to something that seems unrelated totally, but the concept is going to come in. Back to our Masechta. The Mishnah said, Hareini Nazir, if someone says, I'm a Nazir, and it's on me to do the hair cutting process of another Nazir. His friend is also overhears him. He says, wow, he's so inspired by him. He says, me too. And it's upon me to do the hair cutting of another Nazir. So we said in the Mishnah, he said that if they're intelligent, because you don't have to bring your own carbon, go ahead, do the other guy's carbonas. And vimlav, if not, okay, the megalchem nezamachem. If you already brought your own carbon, then they're stuck. They have to bring other people's carbon. Okay, but what's the Gemara's question is like this. Shloime Basra, I understand the second guy, who he's the Me Too guy. Ikakadmo kamei. He has the first guy who already took the neder. So you could say, when he took his neder of Me Too, was going on the first guy's carbonis, which was available because that guy already took a neder of Naziris. But the first guy, Mika basra kadme? Was the second guy there when the first guy took the neder? Meaning as in a carbon of naziris? You just told me that what? That a guy, his intent is only for something that's available. But something that's not available, even though it might be, his intent is not for that. So when he said, get me engaged to a woman, it cannot be a girl who gets divorced 2 days later, because at that moment when you make a shliach, she wasn't available. So how over here could the first guy exempt his obligation of a laila galech nazir with the second guy if when you took that, he was not a nazir? You told me your intent is only for things that are available. So someone that's already a nazir in the world, when you say laila galech nazir, would mean that guy. How could it mean the second guy? He wasn't a nazir that time, and you told me your das is only something that's available. What? No, not that shlich is. That's going to be the Gemara's answer. At this point, the Gemara assumes that your das is only something that's available. So, what's available is women that are single. Even though the guy, it takes him a few days or whatever to do research, and the woman's going to become available. No, not going on that. A woman that's engaged, that's married right now, is only going to be divorced 2 days, but not included. That was what we just finished saying to explain. So wait a second. So then, how does the halacha of our Mishnah make sense? How does the first guy who says, you know what, besides me becoming Nazir, I'm even going to take you, in Yerushalayim. I'm going to also pay for his chasna, right? And I'm going to nuza acha. But your intent is only what's available. The guy who did it 2 minutes after you and says, me too, and I'll also make lech Nazir, he could exempt his kabban with you because yours was available. How could you do yours with his? When you take yours, his was never there. And your word only goes on what's available.
Traditionally, when guy sends a shiur on a Chodesh Nisan,
Yeah.
and 2 days after, the woman that got divorced after Chodesh Nisan, it's not a condition.
Right.
Because that's not what he sent him. But had the guy not sent
But the Gemara doesn't send it not because of shlichus. The Gemara understands at this point that's because of the Meshalech's das. A Meshalech haten zin.
But if the Meshalech himself would have, it has to be shlichus, because if the Meshalech himself would have gone, and he would go look for a shidduch, and 2 days after Chodesh Nisan, then when he decides, I'm into shidduchim, and then 2 days after Chodesh Nisan, he finds, this woman is divorced, then we go be Mekadesher.
100%.
It's going to be Mekadesh.
That's
Not
when
because he decided to.
exactly because that's when he's actually doing the action. When you're a Meshaleach, your action is when you make the shliach. So anytime you're doing an action.
So the difference is because there's a shliach.
Okay,
There's no shliach.
yeah, but it's not a din in shlichus. Because in a moment we're going to say it's a din in shlichus. Here, it's not a vard in shlichus over here. When you make a neder, when you do a shlich, when you do any action, when you do any executive decision, it's only what's available. So the shlichus is punkt. It's like okay, and the same thing is also when you make a neder. When you're doing something, you have intent, don't know what's available. So whether it be shlichus, whether it be neder, whatever it is. So when you said a laila galech nazir, should only be what's available. That's not available right now. So then how are you able to say that you're going to exempt your chiv with that, what came later? You told me what comes later is not inherent in your acceptance of what you want to do. So on that, the Gemara continues in Amud Beis and says, Elo hachikama. Rather, obviously, in this old part of the question, obviously, what is inherent in that Mishnah must be that he's saying, if I find someone that's going to be a Nazir, so I will do his hair cutting, even if he takes the neder after my Kabbalah's neder. Because the person, like the Rosh explains, the person does entertain something that's not in front of him. Obviously, you see that because he's going to do the second guy's hair cutting, which was only Kabbalah after him. So the Gemara follows through in the questions. Here also, this is what he's telling him. That if you find a woman that gets divorced, kadishli, so then, engage her to me. So where difficult is on Rava's teaching. Rava said Rabbi Yochanan is going to agree in the case where if a woman had no relatives, and Rava wanted to take it one step further, where we're chopping him on that. And he says, even if she had a sister, but the sister was married at that time, still that woman, Rabbi Yochanan agrees, is going to be permitted. Says, how can you say that? She had a sister, even though she was married to her, if she subsequently got divorced, how do we know that the shliach didn't go and do a kedushin with her? And you're saying that, oh, but she wasn't available at the time he made him a shlich. Who cares? You see from our Mishnah, Masechtas Nazir, that your das is even on something that wasn't available at that time. That it's going to open up. So maybe he did the kedushin on the sister who got divorced, and maybe that is a valid kedushin. So how is Rachel permitted? That's the Gemara's question on Rava. So that Amri they said, and here's where the Gemara switches. That's what I was saying. It's not just regarding daitoi. We're going to make a difference regarding shlichus versus daitoi. Says the Gemara as follows. Amri they said, Loi mashvi in a shliach. It's a din in shlichus. A person will not make an agent ela b'milsi the matzi avet hashta. Only something that he could do right now. But b'milsi the matzi avet lehashta, something that he could not do right now. Loi mashvi, a person will not make a shliach. So Taisus on Amet Aleph, on the first of the widest lines, he says like this: most definitely, the intention of a person is even on something that's not in front of him. So therefore, we could understand the halach of our Mishnah, where the first guy could exempt himself when he says alai legalech nazir with the second guy, who hadn't even accepted it at that time. But yeah, you entertain for things that are going to come up as time goes on. But shlichus is a very different halacha, that a person cannot make a shliach only something that he could do himself at the time when he makes him into a shliach. So therefore, he cannot make him a shliach to engage for him a woman, even that will get divorced, because at this time when I'm making you a shliach, I cannot make the kedushin for this woman. And therefore, even if the shliach is makadeshim to that woman, she's not mekudashas. So it's a din in shlichus. You cannot give your authority, your power of attorney to something that you cannot do yourself right now. So even though in 2 days you could do it, but now you can't do it, so how could I invest you with a power that I myself cannot do right now? That's the halachic difference that the Torah is explaining, what the Gemara is answering, a difference between daita. You're right, daita will be b'melsidulei kamekamei, but shlichus, that you cannot make a shlich for something that you cannot do right now. But then says Torah, if you're going to say, wait a second, this is called ma'asim b'chol yom. This happens every single day. A woman tells her friend, very interesting case, Torah asks him, he says, I want you to do me a favor. Women are very into hafrashas challah. I want you to do me a favor. I have no time. I'm busy. Do me a favor. I want you to knead for me flour and then to separate challah for me. And so too, he says, you find by the yeshiva students, they say this because they're busy learning. They tell them, the Esteg somewhere, they have some flour they bought in the market for cheap. The guy his mother sent from Kiev to where he's in yeshiva in Volozhin, says, do me a favor, mach a bissel meal and be mafresh chal. Says Taisus, how could you do this? How could you make the mamad a shliach? What do you mean? When you're making her a shliach, he himself could not have made the afresh of the challah from the flour because it's not obligated, because you cannot separate challah from kemach. So you just told me that you cannot make a shliach for something that's not yet, that you can't do yet. How can you make the vabel into a shliach to be mafresh challah for you? So Rabbeinu Tam says, not true. Because at that moment, you actually could bring kneaded dough ready and say that this dough should be challah for this flour when it's going to be kneaded. And that's what's called a davish shebiyadoi. That is something you could do right now. And but that's not a davish shebel oilam. It's not something that's not here yet. Because you couldn't, it's also another svar, because you can knead it and you can make it into dough. So that's called bala oilam, because you could do this right now. In other words, it is available. There's something called biyadoi. Biyadai, if you could do it, so it's considered as if it is over here. Like the Gemara says in Kedushin of Samach Beis, when you say that the fruits of this row that's detached should be truma on the fruits of this row that's attached for when it will be detached, and it becomes detached, his words are valid because since it's biyadai, lasas, you could just attach it. So that's not considered kamachusa maisadam. It's not considered like you're lacking, like it's not here and you can't make a shleich for it. And since you could attach it, so therefore it is considered, and you could make a woman a shleich to be mafresh challah on the flour that you're giving her. However, but Tzaisis clarifies, very important. He says, but that reason itself would not be enough to say that you could make a shlich over here because you could knead it and to make it into dough. Because like the Gemara says in Yavamas Daf Beis Amud Aleph, if someone says to his friend, I want you to write a get for my fiance. I'm engaged, but more than a prenup. He's like, I want to get ready that when I marry her, I'm going to divorce her. So the halacha is it's a get. Why is it a get? Because he can be megarish her right now. If he wants to, when you're engaged, you can give her a get too. So the Gemara asks over there, what's with the halacha of Yavama? So what's the question? What do you mean? By Yavama, he's not engaged. But the question is, but he could have bia with her, which then that makes him married to her, and then he can be megarish her. So says obviously from the fact that the Gemara is asking Livim te Mahu, is that since right now he cannot divorce her, so he cannot make a shliach right now to write a get for him to be able to use when he wants to divorce her. Because it's mechusa maisa by having be with her. But even though you could do be right now, so it says here also, since right now you cannot be mafresh, says no, it's not considered biyadai, the fact that he could take the flour and knead it into dough, regarding this that he can make him a shliach, because it's still lacking kneading and rolling it into dough. So therefore, you would have to say the other svara, says Taisus, of like, you could bring a dough that's already made. You can't say the fact that I could make it into dough, because like you see, regarding shlichus, it wouldn't be enough to consider that it's enough for halacha, let's say, when you're taking your trumas and ma'aser yourself. But for shlichus, that's not enough. It has to be mamish that right now it can be done. Not that you could create a situation that then you'll be able to, even though that's biyadei lasses. So that's just interesting. The way.
Cases like the trumas and ma'aser that someone's watching a field, and the absentee owner says to his attendant to take from me truma when after the pears have grown. There's no case in.
If he tells him, meaning something that he cannot do right now.
The pears didn't grow yet.
So it would sound like that you can't. Yeah, you can't make a shliach for something that you can't do right now, unless you're saying that you could be because.
Seems to be done all the time.
I don't know, for something that's not bala ilam, yeah. Sounds like you can't.
So on the field.
That would be if it's ready. He tells him, where do you find the case that where does it say? Yeah, find one. Find one. I don't know.
It's sort of like a practicality thing. Like you can't separate challah until you make the dough.
Right.
You can't be megarish a woman until she's
right.
available.
But that's not really a
So
technique.
when I'm asking someone to do a so-called shlichus for me, my only intention is that I want to get married, and he understands that it's going to take a little time. So the fact that he knows it's going to take a little time, why wouldn't that reflect the fact that maybe the woman right now is not available, but by the time the shliach gets to that town, she's available.
That's if you're saying that it's a technique, that the whole shlich is a technicality. But if you say that shlichus is like shlicham kamaisai, is literally investing in with the authority of your essence, so then you cannot do more than what you yourself can do. So it's not just.
That was brewing when he made the shliach. Clearly, there was something happening,
right.
or else she wouldn't get divorced 2 days later.
Right, but if let's say it's Yevimtai and is not really married to her, I cannot go ahead and make someone a shliach for something I myself can't do. The shliach can't be stronger than the person himself.
But at the time that the shlichus is being called, it can be.
Yes, that's right. So there's in Lumdis you always have what's called the Maisa and the Chalois. That's exactly how most Lumdis, like a lot of Lumdis go. There's the Maisa Kinyan and there's the Chalois from the Kinyan. So there's the action and then there's when it takes effect. When it's going to take effect, you're right, then it's a possibility. But in the action, at that time when you created the shlichus, when you made him an agent, it's not stam, you make a kinyan. You're actually investing in with some authority. You can't give him authority for something that you don't have the ability to give over right now.
Before where a person said, I'm going to marry her after she gets divorced.
Right.
So
There's no shlichus over there. That's a t'nai.
But would a person in that situation, if he's obviously aware that there's a potential possibility this woman is going to be available, and he says, listen, right now she's not available.
Hey, you're asking a question.
I know she's going to be available.
Hey, you're asking a question. You're saying, why can't you go ahead by shlichus and invest him in something that should be when you could.
This isn't going to happen until.
Right. The only thing is, the difference is by the person he continues. A shliach doesn't continue. A shliach remains with whatever you invested him. Like he's like a robot, an AI person. He only has what you gave him. You'll continue growing, but the AI cannot. He's only what you invested in him. So you could say when you're going to become a gieres, because you'll continue to grow for that situation. You'll still be there. The shliach will not become that anymore. He's only with what you gave him when she was not, and therefore he cannot. But yeah, it's a good question, exactly. But so that was the answer to the question about the difference between our Mishnah and the halacha that Rav explained in Rabbi Yochanan, in the fact of that there's a difference between das and shlichus. Das, yes, is even something that's not here, and therefore you could go ahead and say it's on the second guy's naziris. But shlichus, no, shlichus cannot be for somebody that's not yet here in the world. Says Gemara, V'loi? The Gemara continues asking, really? It's not? But Tashem, let's bring a raya from the following brisa. Brisa says, someone says to his caretaker, there's a butler in this house who runs his whole affairs. He says, do me a favor, I'm going away for the month. I'm going to Panama. I have some business, some pleasure. All the vows that my wife is going to take, from here until when I come back, do me a favor. I don't want to come back and find out that my wife took a bunch of nedarim and that I'm going to be up the creek with her. Do me a favor, hafala. Nullify every vow that she makes. Okay. V'hafala, and he nullifies her vows. Says the Brisa, and you would think, okay, it's nullified because he made the butler into a shliach to nullify all the wives nedarim. Tamalam it says mamidbo. No, it says isha yikimeno. Her husband will validate her nedarim. The isha yifareno, and her husband will nullify her vows. So you see from Rabbi Yishia says that no, it says in the pasuk only the husband can nullify. He can't have the butler. Rabbi Yochanan says, what's haste? What are you talking about, Rabbi Yishia? We find throughout Shas Shluchim Kamaisai. The agent of a person is like himself. And if he could do it, he could do it. Okay. But says the Gemara, time Adam Rachman Ishi Kemen Ishi Verena, as Tais explains, we really could have asked straight up from Rabbi Yochanan. We just wanted to ask also from Rabbi Yishia. Even Rabbi Yishia, the reason why he says that the butler can't do it is because State and Teira, her husband has to be mefer. But if not for that, he would agree to Rabbi Yochanan that a betrappas mefer, that the caretaker, the butler, the bodyguard, whatever he is, he can go ahead and be mefer on the dog. Okay, let's ask the following question. Tanya, whether it be a Mishnah or Brisa, we learn regarding himself that it says the following halacha. If someone says to his wife, tells his wife, look, I'm going away. Any neder you're going to make from now till I come back, you kayamin. I want to validate them. So the halacha is lo yamaklum. He hasn't said anything. Why? Tais explains because that's what's called hakama b'tois. It's an erroneous validation because she might make something he won't be able to survive with. So it's erroneous and it's not going to have a validation. Okay, but that's not the main point. The next, let's say he says harein mufarim. Let's say it's the opposite. He says any neder you're going to take till I come back, they're all nullified. So machlekes tanoim. He says it's nullified, like the Rashi explains, because a person doesn't want a woman that takes nedarim, and he's pleased that all her nedarim should be nullified. So therefore, okay, he wants it. It's not mistaken. He wants them to be nullified, and he could do that. But they say no, ina mufa, they're not nullified. What's the reason? So the Rashi explains from the Gemara in the Darim that because it says in the pasuk ishi kemen ishi fereno, tells us only if you could do hakama could you do hafara. We just explained that if he was being mekaymet, it's not going to be hakama. So therefore, Chacham says it's not going to be hafara. Okay, but what's the question? Says the Gemara like this: Kesal gedaitach, the Gemara, the Bnei Yeshiva, they assumed ki amar Rabbi Yeshua. When Rabbi Yeshua said, now, what do you mean Rabbi Yeshua? Rabbi Yeshua was the one who said that the reason why the butler can't do it is because it says ishi yikemena ve'ishi yiferena. But we said if not for the pasuk, we would have thought that the caretaker, the butler, could be made for the nedarim of the wife. Now, they thought that Rabbi Yeshua was saying he's teaching a liba de rabbanon. That what? That we just quoted right now. The army that they say, loy motzi mefer. The husband cannot nullify for when, before he leaves on his trip and saying every neder you're going to take is going to be mufa. So wait a second. You're telling me that if the pasuk would not have said the caretaker, the butler, would be able to be mefer the neder. Wait a second. But you see, something he himself cannot do, he can make a shliach. You just finished with your shtickle teira telling me that even though a guy's das, like in our Mishnah, Nazir, is even though something didn't come around yet, but for shlichus, it won't work, which was Rabbi Yochanan's teaching that Rabbi was qualifying with the sister that was married at that time. Because you cannot make you can't do something, you can't make a shliach something that you can't do yourself. Right now in Rosh Chodesh Nisan, this woman's married. So you can't make him a shliach even though in 2 days she can get divorced, because right now you can't do it. What do you mean? Look at this halacha of Hafachas Nadarim. You can't do it, according to Rabbanan, when you're leaving on a trip. Yet you can make a shliach to do it when you're leaving on a trip. How can you do that? I thought you can't make a shliach, but you yourself cannot do. You can't do it because, yes, Ishi command Ishi Farenda. If you can't do Hakama when you're going, you can't do Hafava. Fine. Say it's a kasa, whatever it is, Hekesh. But otherwise, you can't do it. So how are you going to make the butler, the caretaker, do it to be made for all your wives in the dagim when you're away on vacation? I thought you can't make a shliach do something you can't do yourself.
But here's the perfect example of something that didn't ever exist. It's the same. It's a neder that a wife makes is something else that's not davar shebadayim.
So how do you make a shliach?
Exactly.
That's the Gemara's question.
In case of shlichus,
No, the apotropis is a shliach. We're saying that you can make an apotropis to be made for when you're away on vacation, but you yourself can't do that. How can you make a shliach do something you can't do yourself?
You do this Gemara. You let me suffer to that question.
Yeah, I like doing that. No, I'm sure.
The husband knows that the wife is going to make a neder. He doesn't know what she's going to say, but she definitely has some type of chazaka going on where he appointed a shliach, so he knows she's going to make a neder. So
Then why can't he? Then why can't? But Lamaisa, he can't do it himself. Why can't he do it?
What do you mean?
He can't. Before he leaves on the trip.
I am a husband. I am able to be mouth for my wife.
Yeah, but when you're leaving on the trip, you're getting your visa and you're on your way to the airport now. You want to tell your wife, I'm away for a month. Every neder you're taking is going to be nullified and void. You can't do that. What's the reason? The Rush brings from the Dharm because you can't make him, so you can't be made. That's not really the reason. The reason is because we compare it to Hakama, and you can't do Hakama because it's going to be Hakama B'toyis, and you don't really know what she's going to say, so you're not going to want it. But it doesn't make a difference for us. The mice, you can't do it.
He has to be Shammai, he has to hear about it.
Yeah, so that we'll see about Shammai. We said already when he comes back, then he hears it. He's going to mention in a second about that. But Lamaisa, he can't do it. So how can he make a shliach to do something he himself can't do? That was a whole teretz you just gave me to resolve it from the stira, from our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, yeah, you're assuming that this is going, Rabbi Yishai is going according to the Rabbanan. The Dim Ali b'Rabbi Eliezer. The Meir is going according to Rabbi Eliezer. The Mamatzi Mefer. We quoted this as a machlekes tanoim. If the husband can be made for before he leaves, maybe it's going like Rabbi Eliezer holds. Husband could be made for, and therefore he can make a shliach to be made for. No grace to stira. So if that's the case, lama l'shavi shliach, which is basically what you're saying. So why does he have to make an agent? If you tell me the husband can make before he leaves from Panama, he could go ahead and be made for himself. So leifa la'ihu. When he leaves the house, say, honey, by the way, besides all my emails is that, every neder you make is going to be mufra. Los machsta apotropos. You can do it yourself. Says the Gemara, that's a technicality. That's not so difficult. Because some he thinks, Dima mashtin lina. Maybe I'm going to make a mistake. Or the schana, I'm going to be angry. Or I'm going to be disturbed. I'm going to have jet lag for my trip. Whatever it is, he wants to appoint an apotropos because, I don't know, when I come back and I'm going to hear about it, I might be disoriented. I'm going to take a nap, and before I know it, it's already finished Yem Shammai. I'm not going to be made for it. So therefore, he wants to make an apotropos who's going to be settled, he's going to hear, he's going to follow, and therefore that's not difficult. But then says Taisus, which are really the questions that you were asking, he says, wait a second, why can't he be made for it right now? Now he's settled, now he understands, now he recalls, so why can't he do it right now? So Taisus, no, he doesn't want to say that it should be muffer only in the dharm that she's going to take from when he actually leaves, but not in the dharm before he leaves. But then says, okay, but let him say right now, any dharm you're going to take the moment I get on my plane until I come back should be muffer. Says Taisus, yeah, but that's going to cause a fight between them because that's always difficult. And they're going to say, oh, whatever, this and that. So he's leaving in a week from now. So they're going to be fighting about this the whole week, about him not trusting her. It says in the Gemara, and the Dharm actually asked this, that if the husband could be made for without him hearing, so then the hafara, the shliach, is not going to be effective until the husband hears the neder. As the Gemara explains it within Daf Ayin Beis. Based on this, you have to explain that when the Gemara is saying leifa la'ihu, he should make the hafara. In other words, when he travels away, the husband should be made for, and the hafara is going to be effective when he comes back and he's going to hear the neder. And if he's going to wait to be made for until he comes back and he hears, maybe he's going to be disturbed when he hears it, and he's not going to go ahead and do the hafara then. And therefore, we're saying, so do the hafara right now. Let it be effective when you're going to hear about it. So if you're holding Rabbanan, it makes sense because you cannot be made for. And the Gemara answers no, even though according to Rabbi Lezer you could do it right now, but he's concerned that maybe he's going to be tagud when he wants to travel, and however you interpret it, but that's a technicality why he would want to make an apotropos. But al kapanim, we have not refuted this interpretation because it could be like Rabbi Lezer, and therefore we didn't contradict what we had answered before. Now look at the next Mishnah. And let's say someone, which is really the seifa of the previous Mishnah, someone says, I take it upon myself to do the hair cutting procedure of a half a nazir. So the previous Mishnah said legalech nazir. Here he's saying legalech chatzi nazir. And his friend hears and he says, and me too, which Taisa really says this is really unnecessary because the machlokes is really regarding the first guy. The second guy is just like following the symmetry of the previous Mishnah. We don't need this second guy too. But okay, you have this Robin and Batman. And he says, and me. It's upon me to cut half of a nazir. Okay, what's the halacha? So we have a machlokes tanoim. Meir says, okay, you have to actually do an entire hair cutting procedure of a nazir, not half a nazir. They say, no. Each one does a half a nazir like they took. Now, Amar Rava makes an important qualification. He says, everyone agrees, where you would say the following words, and the words are always very important. Chatzi karbanos nazir alai. Half of the karbanos of a nazir are on me. That for sure, everyone agrees, chatzi karbanos, you bring half the karbanos, because you said half the karbanos. So for sure, that's applicable, that you could bring half of the karbanos that individual is obligated, that you could make yourself obligated in. So that no one disagrees, that will only be half. Let's say you said the following words, karbanos chatzi nazir alai. The karbanos of a half a nazir is on me. Kulei carbon by Yisrael. Everyone would agree that then you have to bring all the karbanos of a nazir. My time, what's the reason? You don't find a half-baked nazir that since you had the words chatzi near the words nazir, so it sounds like from his words that the word chatzi is on the nazir. Now, there's no half-baked nazir. It might look like one, but there's no halfway nazir. So it's a ganze nazir, so you have to bring all the karbanos. What's the machlekes? What's this? Everyone agrees this case, everyone agrees this case. What is the machlekes? The disagreement is specifically Belishna de Masnin Peligi. They're disagreeing in the wording of our Mishnah. The wording of our Mishnah was Harei Olai Legaleach Chatzi Nazir. So what's the machlekes? Meir Sava he holds even the Harei Olai. If you just take his first words Harei Olai Legaleach Ichayva Kuli Karban Naziris. At that moment you became obligated in all the karbanos of Naziris. It's like you're saying Hareini Nazir. If you say Harei Legaleach, stop, you already will mechayiv yourself an entire carbon. Because as we mentioned already many times in this Masechta, Meir holds what's called Tafas Lashon Rishon. The first thing you say is primary. The moment you say the words Harei Legaleach, boom, it's an entire Giluach. Says the Gemara, B'chikamar Chatzi Nazir. Now when you say further, half, Chatzi Nazir, lav kol kamine. You can't do that. It's like someone who says, karbanos of a half a nazir is on me. We got to bring a whole carbon. But for karbanos, they hold no. They're like Rabbi Yasi. Neder Pesach imehu. It's like af begmal dvar of adam nitvas, which you're clarifying at the end what you were saying in the beginning. And therefore, since you end up by saying chatzi nazir, so that's going to qualify, and it's going to be only of a half. Now, Taisa asks that, how do we understand this wording? Since he's saying a lie, he's obligated in the whole thing. So why don't you just say explicitly that it's similar to the case of when someone says karbanos chatzi nazir, and the Rabbana hold that it's neder pischa imay, which is like saying chatzi karbanos nazir a lie. Why does the Gemara say it in a way that it's as if he's saying hareini nazir? And then the end he's trying to back out. Says Taisus, what Rav is trying to say is that when you say karbanos chatzi nazir lie, that you have to bring the whole thing, because the word chatzi is going on the word nazir. That's the basic principle. There's no halfway nazir. So it's really, what is the word chatzi going on? But he says, what it sounds like in the Mishnah, that the word chatzi is going on a lie. So it's as if you said chatzi karbanos nazir lie. And therefore, that's why you're going to be obligated in only half of the karbanos. So really, it's about translating what the word chatzi is. When you're saying harei legaleach chatzi nazir, if you say like Rabbanan, the word chatzi is on the harei alai. It's on me to bring half of the kabbanas of nazir, so it's going to be half. According to Meir, no, it's saying chatzi nazir. There's no half a nazir. So it's like saying harei alai to legaleach al kabbanas chatzi nazir, which then you're going to have to bring all the kabbanas of a whole nazir. That's the machlekes going to tell you what the word chatzi is going on, and that's the machlekes regarding if you're going to bring half for a whole thing to any time. Those things.